Are you a fan of StarCraft? What about Company of Heroes or the Total War games? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then you probably have a small studio in Las Vegas to thank. If you answered no, then you're probably not a real gamer girl like me. While the real-time strategy genre is seen as a dying breed nowadays, back in the 90s it was one of the most popular types of PC games. This was largely thanks to one studio, Westwood, who popularised the genre of games such as Dune 2 and Command & Conquer. In this video, I'll examine the rise and golden years of the once great studio, and see what happened behind the scenes to result in its eventual downfall. Spoilers, it was EA. Westwood Studios was founded in 1985 by two men, Brett Sperry and Lewis Castle. The studio was named after the Westwood neighbourhood of Los Angeles, which had a reputation at the time as a place where the professional world clashed with the more informal entertainment industry. This turned out to be a pretty apt name for the company. The studio was initially given the very uncool name of Westwood Associates, to give them the option of going into the world of traditional business software in case the whole making video games without any idea if they're going to work out idea failed. Thankfully for them, and for us, their first step into the gaming industry, porting 8-bit titles to 16-bit systems, was a mild success. After enough of these ports, they finally had enough money to embark on their first original title, Mars Saga. The game was released in 1988 and was their first time working with an up-and-coming publisher known as Electronic Arts, or EA for all you cool kids out there. After a couple more games, they made Battletech, The Crescent Hawk's Revenge, a mech game based on a similarly named tabletop title. Many people contribute this game as being one of the pioneers of real-time strategy, giving players the ability to speed up, slow down, or even pause time entirely while giving orders, thus laying the foundations for the genre as we know it today. Another few years of successful releases followed, including the popular RPG Eye of the Beholder, with each new success growing the young studio's experience and prestige even further. Eventually, Westwood's impressive growth caught the eye of big-time publisher Virgin Games, who merged with the studio in 1992, with Brett Sperry leading the combined company. This merger kicked off a sort of golden age for Westwood, which started with the release of their first true RTS game, Dune 2, in December of 1992. Virgin had originally given the Dune license to another studio known as Cairo, who had created a fairly successful first game in the series. Unfortunately, the sequel, which they were trying to develop as an RPG, wasn't going as well. Internal conflicts within the studio, as well as a disappointing lack of progress in the new game, prompted Virgin to give the license to Westwood instead. This risk definitely paid off for the publisher, as the game went on to win multiple awards and still features in those 1000 best games of all time ever subscribed to WatchMojo lists. Westwood took everything they had learned from creating Dune 2 and started development on a new series. Released in 1995, this game revolutionised PC gaming and ignited hope in an emerging genre. This game was, of course, Monopoly, which ended up being the 5th best-selling computer game of 1995, just behind some other game about Command & Conquer or something. This other game introduced some amazing new features, including beautiful 3D models, as well as fully acted full-motion cutscenes, which were revolutionary and complemented the already great gameplay. You can really tell that everyone had fun making the game, with amazingly campy cutscenes and a relaxed atmosphere around the office. In fact, the lead programmer, Joe Bostic, said that it was so much fun that I would sometimes marvel that I actually got paid for it. Everyone else seemed to agree, with the game releasing to rave reviews and going on to sell over 3 million copies. A 1992 issue of Computer Gaming World gives us a great insight into what made Westwood special during this time. This was just after their merger with Virgin and they were moving to snazzy new offices in Las Vegas, which I guess you could say was a bit of a gamble. They had around 50 employees at this time, out of which 20 of them, or 2/5 of the entire studio, were artists, most of whom had previous experience at big name animation companies such as Hanna-Barbera and Disney. The art team at the studio opted not to use off-the-shelf software, even though it would have been much more time efficient than the frame-by-frame approach that they used, insisting that even though a full day's work could be over in a single second of gameplay, the gamer could tell the difference. Westwood was also at the cutting edge of technology, with a company server of over 7 gigabytes, or 1/10 of a modern game, and communication within the studio taking place via the magic of electronic mail. They also elected to have their own in-house testers, contrary to what other studios at the time did, which was to simply let the publisher do the playtesting. This gave Westwood instant feedback on their games and allowed them to make them much more polished than the competition, improving the studio's reputation with gamers. One quote from the article stands out however. Towards the end of the decade, they were considered notorious for missing milestones, that is, being late with a product. By 1992, the situation had so reversed itself that many publishers would assure journalists that a project was going to be completed on time because Westwood was doing it. In other words, if Westwood were going to make a game, they were going to make it on time, and you can be sure that it was going to be good. Over the next couple of years, Westwood continued to grow at an impressive rate. By 1998, the studio had over 150 employees and boasted a 5 to 6% share of the PC gaming market. That's 6% of the entire market. This rapid growth started to worry Brent and Lewis a bit, and they thought that they should try to either self-publish or merge with an existing publisher. Thankfully, several companies were trying to court the Allure studio, including prominent publisher Sierra Online. But after multiple attempts to reach an agreement, that deal eventually fell through. Everything changed though when Westwood's parent company, Virgin, decided to go public. Virgin Games was owned by Spelling Entertainment, best known for Beverly Hills, 90210 and other amazing shows. Spelling were themselves owned by a Virgin... Spelling were themselves owned by entertainment giant Viacom. Blockbuster was also involved somehow, and probably Enron and PepsiCo. And, I don't know, Russia was probably in there somewhere. Okay, I'll be honest here, I don't really know how the business world works, and I couldn't really be bothered trying to figure it all out. But basically, EA wanted Westwood. They really wanted them. But due to EA and Virgin being the number 1 and number 2 publishers respectively in the UK, they couldn't just buy Virgin thanks to the UK's strict anti-monopoly laws. Which is actually fair enough, because those games can go on for ages and can be pretty annoying. Westwood made up most of the US side of the business, and was the only bit EA really wanted anyway. So to solve this problem, Viacom simply got rid of the UK part of Virgin Games. If the UK part doesn't exist anymore, then EA wouldn't be breaking any UK laws but buying Virgin. And buy it they did, for $122 million, or £75 billion. And eventually, after years of trying, Westwood eventually belonged to EA, John Ravioli, and the rest of the boardroom young team. While all of this business stuff was going on, Westwood is in the middle of developing their next Command & Conquer game, Tiberian Sun. This project had already been delayed and was running into a number of different problems. Thankfully, they had just been acquired by EA, who are famous for their help and patience with their studios. Development of some systems such as 3D models and destructible bridges was taking much longer than the studio had predicted. In response to these problems, EA basically said, "I don't give a shit, where's my money?" and pushed Westwood to release the game ASAP, even though it wasn't really finished. As a result, the game launched with a number of engine and gameplay features missing, as well as numerous bugs that have still not been fixed to this day. While it did get good reviews and a lot of sales, the cracks in the studio were starting to show, and Westwood's games were starting to lose their famous polish. This is where things get a little bit confusing. Remember how EA bought all Virgin Games' US operations? Well, that included a smallish studio known as Burst, who had created relatively unknown games such as Toonstruck and Spot Goes to Hollywood. After their consolidation into EA, Burst was renamed Westwood Pacific, effectively creating 2 different Westwoods, or Westwood-I. I don't know what the plural of Westwood is. It was Westwood Pacific which ended up working on the popular Red Alert 2, and not actually the main Westwood studio. This was the studio that continued to work on the Command & Conquer franchise, including Yuri's Revenge and Generals, while the main studio was set to work on other unrelated projects. These other projects were met with average reviews and even more average sales. They included another Dune game named Emperor Battle for Dune, an action-adventure game starring a red-headed pirate with some big old ships, and another Command & Conquer game that EA had turned into a first-person shooter for some reason. After the failure of these games, EA decided to severely downsize the studio, getting rid of many talented developers and leaving it a shadow of its former self. Westwood soldiered on, however, and released an ambitious MMORPG called Earth and Beyond in September of 2002. Development of this game had started all the way back in 1997, before EA had even purchased the studio. The long development time seemed to pay off, with great review scores and pretty decent sales. Behind the scenes at EA though, things were not going as smoothly. The publisher's online division, EA.com, posted a loss of $3.5 million for the final quarter of 2002. This came after a loss of $6.7 million during the same period the previous year. The publisher, looking for any way to cut expenses and stop hemorrhaging money, started looking for studios and projects that they could do without. The middling performance of Westwood's recent games and the general expense of the studio made them a prime target. And so, on the 31st of March 2003, EA cancelled all of Westwood's projects and finally shut down the studio. Earth and Beyond managed to keep going for another few months before it too was shut down on the 22nd of September 2004. After 18 years and several revolutionary games, Westwood Studios was no more, killed by a quarterly report that they weren't even responsible for. The fall of Westwood meant that staff who stayed with EA were moved either to EA's headquarters in Redwood Shores, California, or to the Los Angeles-based EA Pacific, which had formerly been Westwood Pacific, which had formerly been Burst Studios. EA Pacific didn't last long before they themselves were absorbed into EALA, which was then renamed to Danger Close Games, which was then merged with DICE, which resulted in DICE Los Angeles. Many employees left EA during this time or were forced out and went on to work in other areas of the gaming industry. 3 former designers, including co-founder Brett Sperry, left to found Jet Set Games in 2008, whose only release to date has been the turn-based strategy game Highborn in 2013. Others founded Petroglyph Games, best known for the 2015 real-time strategy game Grey Goo. Petroglyph have recently attempted to create a game called Victory via Kickstarter, but this initiative failed, twice. But it looks like they have had some success, with the recent release of the RTS Forge Battalion onto early access on Steam. So, is EA at least making good use of the Command & Conquer franchise? Obviously not. The last real Command & Conquer game, Tiberian Twilight, was released to less than stellar critical and commercial success in 2010. And apart from a browser game and another FPS, there haven't really been any entries since then. Somehow, EA managed to gain one of the greatest game studios and one of the hottest IPs and destroy both of them in the span of a few years. And they continue to do the same thing even to this day. RIP Visceral.